Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about the first ever 5th edition D&D game that I've GM'd. In the spirit of the last personal time when I talked about D&D versus Hero. Reason I say it's the first ever 5th edition game is because I can't recall if I actually ran a 3.5 campaign, but I don't think so. I know I discussed it once with my friend, and this is the thing. Like, I talked about how me and my friends all liked Hero and other systems, like we like Children of the Sun. Most other systems appealed to us more than D&D, to be honest. Like, everybody knows D&D. Everyone knows the rules for D&D. But a lot of times, like, if you're going to do a lot of homebrewing, there are many systems that are more suited to that. D&D is great if you're going to be running in something that's already pre-existing. But in any case, though, like I say, I know that at one point we were going to do, like, we were talking about doing a spoof on video games, and we were like, yeah, so we need a system that's, like, really gamey and feels like, you know, you're leveling up, like, you know, it's like a video game. And we were like, oh, D&D. And then then the idea kind of didn't pan out because none of us really wanted to play D&D because we sort of... Another thing that D&D does is that you don't choose when you progress. Like, you know, you're not awarded a certain number of points, which you spend at your discretion. You just get experience, and once you acquire enough experience, you explode into the new level and have all your new powers. So we just didn't like that, and I'm pretty sure I never ran a D&D game before. So, a while ago, I got started running a D&D 5th edition campaign online through Roll20, and I did this, you know, I just announced to some of the people, like, in the game group and so on and so forth, like, hey, I'm up for running a D&D campaign, and we wound up having 12 players in the campaign, which, if you're familiar with role-playing at all, is just a ludicrous number of people. It's pretty difficult to manage that many people, especially if there's not anyone in there who has, like, an innate desire or sense for leadership. In a lot of role-playing games, you get a guy, oftentimes, who'll, like, usually take charge. Like, he knows everybody, he's comfortable with that sort of thing, he likes to be like, yes, I am the boss, I shall run things. And just because, like, you know, he does that, he has the confidence to step up and do it, it doesn't necessarily mean he's the most capable, but he's just that guy who does that. And you know, that's how you get such a party under control. However, in this particular D&D campaign, there didn't wind up being a particular leader who surfaced up out of it. So it's a little chaotic, and it became a running joke that the party was arrested in every civilized city that they went to, because the first thing that they would do is go there, and without really a strong battle plan, they would kind of walk up and be like, hello, yes, we are fugitives from the law, and then just get arrested right off the bat. So yes, the premise of this campaign was, because it's D&D, I had to think of, like, well, what does D&D fit with? D&D is a very good system for playing D&D, and it's a great system for playing, you know, a Lords of the Rings kind of knockoff. And so I thought it might be funny to do a sort of Lords of the Rings spoof. Like, have the party go off and do like, oh, here's the one ring, you have to go deliver it to somewhere. But instead it was the one anklet. The great evil bad guy was named Lord Archaeopteryx, because Archaeopteryx is an ancient bird. It's an ancient type of bird, and I like the name. I think it's got enough hard consonants that it sounds evil. Lord Archaeopteryx, the Dark Lord of the Undead. He had a magical, powerful anklet that he used to wear, and then one day when he was riding on his great undead wyvern, the anklet fell off. And like, it just came undone, you know, like it does. It was a piece of jewelry. It came off his ankle. It fell out of the sky, and he just lost all his powers. And that's how the Great War was lost. The Great Evil lost most of his power by just losing his piece of jewelry. So yeah, this was a homebrew setting. The whole thing was kind of it was something that I designed. Like, I sat down and I drew out a map, or as much of one as I had time to. I wound up not fleshing it out as much as I intended. But we had, like, here are the core cities and things like that, and this is where I have this is where I intend for the party to go, and for what I expect everybody to do. And in D&D, a lot of times what you'll do is, like, there's all kinds of multiplanar spells, like there's interdimensional travel and stuff like that in D&D. So most GMs find it a terrible headache to try to create your own pantheon of gods to satisfy all the needs of the clerics and everything like that. But darn it, I tried. I tried to come up with a mythology, a homebrew mythology that we could use. It wound up only being used by one player, and this player actually only joined the game towards the very tail end of things. But I invented the religion of Particularis, which was based partially on the Silmarillion. And if you're not familiar with the Silmarillion, this is the lore of the Lord of the Rings series. And what it is it explains that the entire world was made with music. And so, like, for example, the Balrogs that lived in the deep, they were once the sort of angels that used to play the music to make the world, and they were the bass drummers, boom, boom, boom. They were the most disruptive. When they screwed up the song to make it worse to serve their master, they really screwed it up because they had a lot of power, a lot of bang, a lot of, they were dangerous. The Balrogs were the bass drummers. And so on and so forth. They explain like these, all these different creatures and things. They kind of had their parts in the song, and these angels were singing the songs. And so I kind of took that, and I started with the same thing. And I had there was the great god Particularis who created the universe and everything like that. He was the conductor of the band, and then there was the great evil Widfa. And in the Silmarillion, the great evil was Sauron or whatever, and it wasn't Sauron. I can't remember exactly how it worked. It was really boring. The Silmarillion was really boring, so I don't remember everything that was in it. But like whoever their Satan figure was started singing his own song. He got bored with the one that God was trying to get him to sing, and he was like, no, I can do better than this. And he just started singing his own thing, and it was like it didn't match with the original song at all, and he was doing it on purpose. So what I had was Widfa, and this was based on a thing that my middle school band teacher told us. When in doubt, fiddle about, and that was like just when in doubt, pretend to play, but don't actually play, and so like Widfa's whole thing was that he lost his place in the music, and because this was like the music of all creation, the score sheet was infinite. And as soon as he lost his place and didn't know what page they were on, there was no way for him to get back. And he was just like trying to figure out like what page they were on. And I can't remember what instrument that I described him as being on, but it was like an important instrument of some sort. So he just kept trying to like pretend he was playing. And then when that didn't work, like Particularis got angry and was like, you play, bring it up. And so then he just plays as well as he can, but it's like it's not the right time in the music. And so, his bad playing in the creation of time, in the creation of existence, created all the evil in the world. Because it was like this is the dissonance and discord that's created, and so it's based on the Silmarillion's kind of thing. It's a sort of joke on that, and eventually Widfa banished him from his important chair position in the band, and then forced him to sit in the back and play the triangle. And unfortunately, Widfa was still lost in the music and all the chaos, so occasionally he just plays the triangle at the wrong time. And that's towards the end of time when the world simmers down, and then there's like less chaos. There's not any there's fewer great evils. There's only just Widfa playing the triangle badly and screwing everything up. So these are the cycles of like good and evil. There's more evil in the world when Particularis was trying to get Widfa to play his instrument correctly. But in any case, though, I came up with this sort of spoofy mythology and this idea with all the band members, and I only had one player who picked that up and rolled with it and was like, "Oh, okay, like I want to worship the god of the French horn," and it was kind of fun because I talked to her about like what did she want to do, and we made up a mythology for this this angel that plays the French horn, and like what is the meaning of the French horn, what's the character of the French horn, how would you build a religion around this sort of abstract interpretation of the French horn and everything else like that. But everyone else was just like, okay, can I use like this character, this god in the book? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Because you need like a billion gods in D&D. Like, the god that you worship is where you get your powers if you're a cleric. And, if you're a warlock, then you make a deal with certain pit fiends or things like that. So, it matters. And it's just like, okay, yeah, if you want to do something else. Some people also came up with their own things. We had one guy who... we had a mythology surrounding this giant tree that what it actually did was it devoured magic. And I didn't tell him exactly what it was. It was just an eldritch power that his particular character worshipped, and they used it as a prison for mad sorcerers and warlocks and things like that. And so it would drain the power of those people. It was eating magic. And then it would gift. It was actually sentient. The tree was sentient. And it came to him in a dream once, but that was the only thing that ever happened. It never really got revealed what was going on. It was a cool story angle, but it just wound up being out of the way enough that it never came up, sadly. But anyway, though, yeah. So I tried to sit down and figure out everybody's backstories and get everyone sort of on a track. But with 12 players, it's really hard to do, especially because most of the players were new, like they hadn't roleplayed before, so they weren't really sure, what personalities they wanted to have or what their motives were. So we had a couple of characters who were just like, I'm here. Hello. And it was just like, okay, well, I guess you're here and you get hired. And so the opening was everybody was in the town of Middleton, because Middleton is in the center of everything, and that's where you have to start things. That's where these great adventures begin. And a man in a black robe and a face-concealing hood goes out to the middle of town square and describes himself as one of the last great black wizards from the war between the undead and the living. And there was a whole bunch of lore and mythology behind this whole undead and living thing. Because the trouble with D&D is that you get into sort of like there's not... Unless you play the modified systems, like you get into the less fantasy stuff and more into like other modern... Like there's other D20 systems. Like you can do Call of Cthulhu D20, for example. But when you're playing fantasy D&D, you're kind of locked into fantasy. So, you get your orcs and your dragon people and elves and gnomes and trolls and all that stuff. A lot of times what people will do is you find yourself either facing sort of the old stereotypes or subversion thereof. Because unfortunately when your system is closed into just this is the genre that you're in, you kind of wind up treading those similar pathways a lot. It's stuff that everybody's very familiar with. So I put a twist on it, which was to say that there was an entire nation of just undead people, and of course this is not completely original. This is the thing that you see in, for example, Warhammer Fantasy. But the undead people, what I made interesting about them was that essentially the Stark Lord Archaeopteryx, he wasn't like completely intentionally evil. It's just that he found out that when he raised people from the dead, that the magic that he emanated was kind of a little bit, it created a mild euphoria in the undead, and so if he raised them with like full human consciousness and everything like that, like he would just put their souls back in the bodies and bring their bodies back to life and be like, you're alive again, in a manner of speaking, then they really liked him. And he never, like, when he was alive, like, the actual living were kind of repulsed by the aura that he was producing. So the normal living didn't really like Lord Archaeopteryx. They thought he was weird and creepy, and he had really strange burning eyes, and they didn't want to have anything to do with him. So they kind of shunned him, but the dead really liked him. So Lord Archaeopteryx then, eventually, he just started, like, killing people, and then raising them from the dead. And then, like, they all liked him, So for him, it felt like a good thing, and a good idea. And this kind of spread out, and it became sort of a cultural thing, like they became a nation. And the further you were away from Lord Archaeopteryx, the more independent you were. Like, you didn't have a permanent allegiance to him. But his magic kind of sustained you, so you couldn't depose of him. If he died, then supposedly the magic that was animating the entire nation would just go away. He was the great primeval or whatever. So everyone was kind of like, behold, he's like our emperor and whatever, but there were all these sort of independent fiefdoms of like undead kind, and they started to get into like border scuffles and disputes with the living, and eventually a holy war was declared, and it's unclear who exactly caused the war in the first place, but it's blamed on the undead. And the undead, given the fact that they don't need to like eat or sleep or anything like that, eventually gained the upper hand in the war, because they couldn't really be sieged all that well, but they could definitely siege you, and they could just keep moving. They didn't have to keep supply lines quite like people did, and they managed to sweep quite a long distance until eventually a coalition of a multicultural coalition of wizards and tacticians and whatnot banded together and drove them back after Lord Archaeopteryx dropped the anklet somewhere. So yes, so the undead existed out there, and they were perfectly sentient and otherwise normal people, except for the fact that they were being held together by evil magic, which to them didn't seem all that evil because it made them feel kind of nice. So so that was the angle, and for that reason, I think that I forbade wizards because they knew too much. it was the thing, like, the wizards were very high political positions, so I didn't allow people to play wizards. And this is okay, because in D&D 5th edition, wizards are kind of a sucky class. Like, almost every other caster class is more capable than wizards, because they're able to kind of diversify and get into things. Like, the clerics can cast magic, but clerics can also be on the front line. For example, if you're a war cleric. Or warlocks can cast magic. They don't cast as much magic, but they get, like, Pact of the Blade, or they can do stuff with, like, familiars. You know, they get creatures that they summon, and the creatures can do things for them. So every other caster class is actually more powerful than wizards. So I was just saying, like, okay, no wizards. This is a political position. Everyone else, you know, if you want to play a caster, play a warlock or play a sorcerer or a cleric or something, and that way you'll get your magic. But you know, it won't be with the flavor of, like, I can write books, I can write spells in my book, and you know, they're not better spells than what anyone else gets, but I can write them. Yeah. So there was no wizards, and then no pact with fiend warlocks, because the fiend essentially was, you know, it was Lord Archaeopteryx, like, he was the fiend. So you know, if you were an agent of a fiend, you were one of his agents. So I was just like, okay, so no fiend warlocks, and those were the 2 restrictions that I had. And so anyway, though, so yes, so the game begins, and a guy in dark robes comes in, and he calls himself Mr. Skellingrim, and one of the things I like to do sometimes to players is, like, it's like, okay, so I know this is stupid, and I know in real life that would be a dead giveaway, but I want you guys all to pretend that you're wonderfully at all. Because one of the things you can do is, like, oh yes, charm magic. So, you know, you walk in and there's mass suggestion and everyone thinks you're, oh yes, Mr. Skellingrim. And so he describes himself as one of the last great black wizards of the war between the undead and humanity. And he says, I'm looking for some great heroes to help banish a terrible evil from the world. You know, anyone who's interested, please step up to the table. And so everybody that opted in to play this game, they were all like, oh yes, I have a character and I'm stepping up to play this thing. And some people had motivations and stuff like that for their characters because they'd roleplayed before, and some of them did not. But we had a couple of interesting ones. One that stood out was La Rana, who was a Mexican wrestling gladiator, which was kind of cool. He was the monk class, so he was just, like, punching everything to death. We also had Lyman Yates. We had some special fluff for halflings. They were actually often treated as slaves. Their easygoing nature made them very susceptible to crooked business practices, and a lot of them wound up being like legally pressed into slavery and things like that. It was something that it was considered a bit unethical, but was still commonly practiced. And gnomes were often in the same boat, but with elves rather than with humans. Like the halflings often wound up as slaves to humans. You know, they got kicked around militarily as well. So, you know, like, the Shires didn't just get left alone. Humans came out that way and were like, oh, wow, what good farmland. And then essentially kind of kicked the halflings' asses and enslaved them. So Lyman Yates was a halfling, and one thing that he had was he was a freeman halfling. And so he deeply cherished his ability to travel freely and really wanted to make something of himself, so this was a character that jumped in. There was also another one named Hank Shagberg, and Hank was not, like, an especially great character as far as, like, interesting ideas went, but I just remember him being like, he's like, I am the son of a chieftain, and technically I should be chief of an entire orcish tribe, and he gave me this background that was like setting himself up to take over, like, this orcish tribe, and it was kind of like one of those things that I allowed it because I figured, you know, I'll never have the orcs actually find you and declare you king, and I never did. But he was just like, yes, I should be the king of a tribe, and I was just like, all right, yeah, okay. And, you know, so that was his backstory. There was also Guff, and Guff became much more interesting later. Guff was just a man who had his name stolen by someone of magical persuasion, and he didn't know, he just didn't know his name, and so his hope was that if he worked for this wizard, then the wizard could have a spell that would get him his name back, and that was his motivation. And then there was Thelos, I think. Yeah, Thelos. I have to remember because this person has a couple of different characters and a couple of different campaigns. Thelos. And Thelos' whole thing was that Thelos was a woman who was convinced that she was previously a man, but she believed that a wizard changed her gender and had killed her family, who she still lived with, actually. This was interesting. And it could have been, like, this was just a character. This was, I don't know, just a series of weird hang-ups. Like, it was just like this character was like, I believe these things, and they're all incorrect, and they're all provably incorrect, but I believe them anyway. And so her entire goal was to find a man named Count Calaris, no, Count Kalar, a man named Count Kalar, and then kill him and find a way to return back to her original gender, which was actually female. She was female to start with, and her goal was to become male because she believed that was her original gender, because she was insane. And so she signed up because she figured a wizard could help her change her gender. And then of course we had Serena and Akra, and Serena was like, this was kind of a weird duo thing, which eventually became amusing. But this was like two players. So sometimes this is nice when you have two players who agree to have like relationships together, because then you can go back and you could say like, oh, this is Mr. Tulip and Mr. Pins. They're a crime team, and they join the party as a team, and so you don't have to give them both separate motivations. So we had Akra and Serena. Serena was Akra's mother. They were both Dragonborns, and I think Serena was playing the role a little bit more seriously than Akra was. Akra, towards the end, eventually she declared that she was servant to one of the parties. One of the parties was a warlock who had a familiar. He had a little creature that followed him around. He named it Peyton, and this was in the interest of me giving it just Peyton's personality and doing the Peyton voice. And so essentially, what Akra did was she eventually pronounced herself the servant to Peyton, and then Peyton was just like, take off your clothes. Get naked, in the assumption that she wouldn't do it, and then she did, and then at some point later on, I don't know, it was weird. But yes, this and other people there was the party. There was also Ader Flato, and Ader Flato became amusing because Ader for whatever reason began to sabotage the party on a regular basis, and his backstory developed. And if it was funny and stupid, it became canon. So like if it was just funny, like at one point they were like, oh, like we need to talk to this high-ranking diplomat, and it turned out that the high-ranking diplomat was just like Ader's father, and so it was great because the guy's name was Sable and he didn't have a last name. It was like, oh yeah, Sable Flato, the high-ranking wizard diplomat that happens to be Ader's father. And it was funny because the party had so many like spats with Ader, and it was like, do you think Ader will help us negotiate with Sable? And it was like and then Ader was just like, no. No, I won't help. Not at all. Or I think I can't remember exactly how that panned out, but whatever the case, just if it was funny, that was how Ader operated. But yeah, so everybody signed up for this thing. And so what this wizard does, this black wizard Mr. Skellingrim does, is he takes everyone out to this tree where he had apparently he'd found the anklet and then buried it at that tree, and then walked into town, and he insisted that someone else pick it up, which made everybody nervous because they were like, what is it? And he's like, it's the great anklet of Archaeopteryx, the source of all his power. And they were like, oh my god, like why don't you carry it and get it someplace safe yourself? And he says, well, because anyone with great magical potential will set off the amulet and alert every undead for 50,000 miles exactly where it is. So I cannot carry it. It is not possible for me to do so. Here is where I found it, and I need you all to take it far away, far, far away. I don't want... The Lord of the Rings thing was that they take the ring to the fires of Mount Doom, and so all the conflict was them going further and further into the deep, as it were. The catch that we had was they were supposed to take it far away to the opposite side of the continent, where there was a portal to what Skellingrim described as a pawn shop, an interdimensional pawn shop. And the idea was that they were just going to sell the anklet, and this pawn shop was run by like a greater being that didn't like Lord Archaeopteryx very much. And so if they sold it to him, Lord Archaeopteryx would never get the anklet back, and that would be kind of it. That would just be like the undead would be screwed. They'd be sitting around without their source of power for the rest of forever. And so that was the plan. Get it far away from the undead lands. Just take it to the opposite pole of the world, the known world. So off the party went to go and do this deed, and let's see, how long have I got? 20 minutes. Okay, yeah, this is going to be a multi-part thing. So anyway, though, so off the party went this gaggle of 12 players, many of which who had never played before, and they had like a series of paths that they were supposed to go to. Skellingrim instructed them to stay off the roads because he had touched the anklet, and that had set it off, and that meant that therefore the undead were actually already looking for it. And this was, of course, where the idea of the conflict was supposed to come in, because the undead were going to be looking all over the place, and you had to stay off the roads. You had to stay off the roads. So the group went off-road into the woods at the north, and traveled for quite a ways. And originally I had plans for things that were going to happen as they traveled just straight north through the woods, which is what I assumed they were going to do. But instead they got to the edge of the woods and they were like, oh, this is going to be difficult terrain, and we have this wagon. So what if we go around the long way and we don't actually go the way that we would? And I was like, well, it'll take you off schedule. And they're like, yeah, but I mean, schedule is schedule. This is the great evil. Like, we don't want to take any major risks. And so I said, okay, all right, yeah, that's fine. So the group, instead of going through the woods, they went all the way around the woods, and then came to a river, and realized they were going to have to ditch the cart that they had anyway. And so they ditched the cart that they had, and they start heading... I got ahead of myself. Actually, before they got into the woods, they were out in the plains. That's right, they wound up at a set of ruins. An old set of ruins, a town that had been sacked by the undead a long time ago and never rebuilt. Yes, the woods came later. So yeah, this is what they did. They went off to the charred remnants of this old town, and they set up camp there, and they all went to bed. And in the middle of the night, a bunch of pixies showed up, and pixies kind of like shiny things. And so what the pixies did is they started rummaging through everybody's stuff and causing a lot of trouble, and they were everywhere. And as they do, right off the bat, the party lost the anklet because the pixies ran off with every shiny thing they could possibly get their hands on, including a bunch of money and buttons and things like that. And they were easily distracted and just very they were just stupid, easy to distract. They just wanted shiny things. And so they tried to negotiate with the fairies, and they'd be like, listen, if I give you this coin, will you do this? Will you go and you get this coin? Will you get the anklet back from your friends? And the little sprites, the little pixies would just lie, and they'd be like, yeah. No, I'll help you out. I'll do it. Just, give me the coin. And they would take the coin and just fly away. And the idea was that they would never be found again. They'll never know where I went. I took the coin. I outsmarted them. I'm so much smarter than they are. So pretty soon the party realized that the pixies were little assholes, and decided to quit negotiating with them. And instead they caught one. They managed to catch one, and they threatened to squash it with a rock unless it told them where their home was. So they went to go and find where the home was, and it turned out that they had a little ring of mushrooms that was a portal into the pixie world, and the ring of mushrooms was actually on the head of a giant rock troll. And everyone kind of panicked because in D&D, this is one of the things that kind of sucks about D&D. And again, some people like this, but I think it kind of sucks. When I told them, yes, a giant rock troll rises up, and it was about the size of a hill, they panicked. I mean, they should, based on the way that I described it, but they panicked because the players who were experienced knew what level a rock troll was and how much damage it could do, and they were like, oh, that could kill a level 1 player in a single attack. And so they started thinking about all the things that rock trolls do and how they function in D&D, and I had no idea how any of that stuff worked in D&D. I did not play enough D&D to know anything about rock trolls or whether they were hostile or something you could communicate with. But the party, the guys who'd played D&D a lot, immediately assumed that I was throwing a very high-level encounter at them, and that instead of negotiating with this rock troll, they were supposed to immediately roll initiative and start a fight. But no, I wasn't going to do that. The rock troll got up and was very, very dumb. And the fact that it was very, very dumb was how the pixies got it to work for them in the first place. And so the pixie that was being held was torn between trying to get the party killed and trying to save its own life. If he told the rock giant to smash them, then of course the pixie would get smashed too. So they were like, well, how do we get him? He sat up there and he's like, well, what's the password? And there actually wasn't a password, but the pixies told him he had to ask for a password whenever someone approached the thing. So the pixies just went in and out, and the rock troll, the rock giant, whatever you might call it, I guess, he didn't understand. He just didn't understand. He didn't stop the pixies because the pixies were supposed to go in and out. But when a group of people showed up, he was like, well, what's the password? And so the group kind of puzzled around, and they tried to negotiate the password. They were like, what's the password? And the pixies like, I don't know the password. I just go through the thing. I don't know. What do you guys want from me? And they tried to get the troll to admit what the password was. And for a while, after enough cajoling, they finally figured out that the troll didn't even know what the password was. So they offered to help the troll. They're like, well, what if we help you come up with a good password? And the troll was like, oh yeah, I guess that would be a good idea. So we had a couple of persuasion rolls go around, and eventually, like, they came up with a password for the troll, and they were like, oh well, how about this for a password? And the troll was like, yeah, okay, that's pretty good. So what's the password? And they tell him the password, and he's like, okay, yeah, I'll let you in. So he kneels back down and lets the party crawl up on top of his head and teleport themselves off to go deal with the pixies. And so the pixies, it turns out, they have a little mushroom kingdom in their own little area. And again, the party was worried. The people who were familiar with D&D were concerned that they were entering the kingdom of the Fae, which is a big deal. Like, the Fae hold dominion there. Like, the Fae are often powerful tricksters and things like that. But again, I had no idea. Like, D&D, I didn't play enough D&D. So for me, it was just Pixie World. And so they went down there and they found like a bunch of walls made out of like mushrooms. And there were like a bunch of pixie guards, and the pixie guards were all nervous and concerned because they were like, oh no, like, what do we do? We're being assaulted. It's an army. And so the guys show up and they're like, hey, like, give us back our stuff. And the pixies are like, oh, you're here for our stuff? You're here for your stuff? And they were like, yes, yeah, give us back our stuff and we'll leave peacefully. And the pixies are like, okay, we'll give back your stuff. Hang on a minute. Release the animals! And so the gates open up and a bunch of like birds fly out and other animals. And a bunch of them aren't like well trained, so they just run off. But some of them have been trained effectively. So the party winds up doing this battle with a bunch of like just woodland creatures that are running around. Some of which scared, not attacking. Others of them like birds and things like that attacking. And the pixies are working really hard to open up this, like, there's only like one gate that's made out of anything particularly substantial. And they're trying to open this thing up. And what leaps out of that is this very large, hulking dog that's made out of like flesh and bone and things like that. And what this was is they called them siege hounds. It was the undead used to create these creatures during sieges, and what they would do is they would run around in packs, and they would look for supply lines that were trying to get into the cities. They just hunted all day and night, and if they found anyone or anything, they would just maul it. And so they were large, they were very bony, had a lot of armor, a lot of natural armor, and just vicious and killed things. And the pixies had managed to catch this thing because they'd found it buried in that old town that they were at. Like, it was in a basement, like buried in a bunch of stuff. But because it was undead, it didn't need to eat or sleep or anything like that. It was just lying down there, buried, waiting for someone to dig it out. So the pixies devised a plan to capture it, and they hauled it all the way back to their deal, and then they just put it in this cage and decided that it was going to defend them. And they really had no control over it or anything like that. They just figured, this was a good idea. So they released this thing on the party as they're pretty much effortlessly swatting all the birds and everything out of the way. And so this siege hound runs out and attacks them, and the siege hound actually meant a little bit of business. It did some damage, but consistently throughout this campaign, I could not figure out how to balance an encounter. D&D, like I say, they have CR tables. What those are called combat rating tables. But they're all designed to give combat ratings to a party of like 4. A party of 12 is completely out of the bounds of D&D's system to handle. Like, D&D is not designed to be played with 12 players. You do not design monsters freely enough to really have a chance, a prayer. Because weirdly, like when you get that many people, like, you get so many roles all built up and in place that everything's overlapping. You have no weaknesses. Like, the guy on the front line is going to be he's going to be your shock trooper. The guys in the back lines are going to be throwing magic. You're going to have like multiple spells coming out. It's super hard to balance. It's difficult to do. And I kept leveling up the party every time I considered them having completed a challenge. And because I gave levels according to story progression rather than experience progression, because I figured that made more sense. They would just progress as I saw fit, as opposed to like trying to calculate experience per encounter. So it's just like, I don't know, don't worry about how much experience you get, you'll just level up when I say you level up, because, D&D, like, you just reach a new level anyway. I figure, why not just have a little bit of control, and I'll do it when it's appropriate. So, yes, it was super difficult to balance, and the dog did a little bit of damage, but really not very much. I believe that every single encounter the party ran into might have been classified as easy, for the most part, because I never really did figure out how to challenge a group of 12. But anyway, though, yes, they managed to get rid of the dog, and then after that, the pixies panicked, and they all went into full retreat mode. And so it was just total chaos. They walk into like the pixie city, and like the pixies are all grabbing their things, and you know, they like, oh, they're gonna loot our mushroom, they're gonna loot our berries and our figs and everything else. Like, grab the figs, and they're trying to like evacuate, and the party is just like treating them like buzzing insect. They're like, just make sure they don't run off with anything that we need. And so they approach the Pixie King, and the Pixie King is like, oh no, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know. Like, we didn't know it was the mighty. We didn't know your mighty army would come for us if we took your things. I didn't order this. And so they're like, it's like, okay, just calm down, calm down, calm down. Like, and he was like, no, you can marry my daughters, you can marry my wife, you can take anything at all. And they're like, no, 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 calm down, calm down. We just want the anklet back and our gold. And so the Pixie King was like, oh, are you sure you don't want my wife or anything? And they're like, no, 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 I don't want your wife. And then he's like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I can give you back the things I stole. But I mean, I could, if you really want, I could do something else for you instead. I mean, I don't have to give back the things I stole. And they're like, no, no, give us back the things that you stole. And so the Pixie King gave them back their stuff. And that was the battle of the Pixies. Party just completely overwhelmed the Pixies, but the Pixies gave them trouble for a little while. So that was the first encounter. And again, like I say, the Pixie thing wound up being weird because it turned out that one of the Warlock characters, he liked the Pixies, he liked the personalities that I gave the Pixies. So he actually took a Pixie as a familiar, and I'm not sure if that's entirely how the familiar thing works. I believe it states specifically what kind of familiars you can have with Pact of the Chain, but I was fine with it because, you know, whatever. But it wound up being like, I just had the Pixies doing this sort of thing. But then when he took the Pixie Familiar, they went to the monster manual, and they're like, what does D&D say that Pixies can do? So it wound up being that this Familiar Pixie was substantially more competent than the Pixies in the little village. It was just like, yeah, I make a Familiar out of one of these Pixies. And it turns out to be an incredibly competent Pixie. Shockingly, the rest of the Pixies were all stupid. So yeah, so that one was named Ray. That was the first Familiar, and so that was Ray, and so I used the Ray voice, and so Ray, you know, like Ray was like this Pixie that hung around, and Ray could do like poisons and things like that. And so like sometimes Rummel was the name of the Warlock. Rummel would just ask Ray to go do things, and Ray would go and do her best. You know, like, and it was kind of interesting because there was that bit where it was like, I'm not sure if he was supposed to have a Pixie or get quite the setup that he had. I think it was allowed. But he kind of just let me roleplay Ray at whatever capacity. So he would ask Ray to do things, and then Ray would just go do it, you know, to whatever. Like, she would follow directions, but she would do it in sort of a Ray way. So it was sometimes kind of a little bit obtuse to what he wanted. But it was kind of like she did her best, and so she'd come back and be like, I tried. Like, I did my best. And there was never any fuss about that. It was just like, all right, you know, thanks for trying. And it was like, yeah, no. I'm glad to have tried. I did good today. So yes, the Pixies. That was what came of the Pixies. We got an inspiration for a familiar, and everybody got their first level. And I think that was why he wound up with the familiar, because you get your first pact or whatever in Warlock when you're level 2, I believe. I might be mistaken. But yeah, that was the first little challenge for the game. And I suppose, yes, I can make this a multi-part thing because there's multiple parts to this, and it goes on, and there's some good stuff that happened in this campaign, and now I believe it's over. It doesn't actually reach a total conclusion, but it does eventually sort of come. The first section of the game does come to an end. There is one chapter of the game, and that closes, and then the second chapter begins, but that one actually does not get resolved. We've moved on to a hero system campaign at this point. So yes. I suppose that'll be it for today. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.